What does the 2024 NFL Draft tell us about the direction of the Buffalo Bills defense? I'm exploring that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. Yesterday on the podcast, we went through the offensive side of the football and discussed how the arrival of 5 draft picks impacts the direction of the offense, the scheme, the different position groups. And today we're going to do the same thing, but for the defensive side of the football. Pretty fascinating. The Bills used 10 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. And on defense, they used exactly 1 pick at every single position. So we're going to work through that 1 pick at each position and discuss what it means for that position group and maybe some ideas for what this defense is going to look like moving forward. And I want to start with the secondary. In this segment, we're going to talk safety and corner. In the next segment, we're going to talk defensive tackle, defensive end, and linebacker. And then the Bills also picked up Greg Rousseau's 5th-year option on his contract. And so I want to break that down for you in the final segment today. But let's start with the first pick that the Bills made on defense, and that was Cole Bishop, 2nd round, pick 60. And so that was the Bills' original 2nd round pick. They picked Keon Coleman, of course, at 33. And at pick 60, it's Cole Bishop, the safety out of Utah. So what does this say? Well, first of all, it's clearly a new day at safety for the Buffalo Bills. The outstanding run that we enjoyed from Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde very clearly in the rearview mirror. Jordan Poyer is a Miami Dolphin. Still weird seeing him in that those colors. We've seen him on his Instagram page at the facility. It has not sunk into me. But Micah Hyde, it sounds like maybe it's not completely over. Brandon Beane has told us that he's recently spoke to Micah Hyde and he hasn't fully made that decision. And it feels like if he wants to play, it would be in Buffalo. Brandon Beane said that Micah Hyde said he couldn't imagine playing for somewhere else. So if Micah Hyde still wants to play football and the Bills want to have him, it feels like that could happen. But as of right now, it's not the case. And so the Bills have this new trio of top safeties that includes Taylor Rapp, Mike Edwards, and the arrival now of Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop is a versatile player, but a guy that I see best as a low safety. When he gets a chance to blitz, shoot gaps, play down near the line of scrimmage, play man-to-man coverage against tight ends, that's where I felt like he had his best tape. And so it says to me that the Bills want that enforcer-type safety. Now, that doesn't mean that Cole Bishop doesn't have athleticism. He's got tons of athleticism. Very dynamic athlete. He has the athleticism to play in deep alignments and play, well off the ball if that's what the Bills want him to do. But I'm just saying his best tape, if you watch him at Utah, I don't think it's hard to figure this out. Very good playing down closer to the line of scrimmage. And then when he does play deeper, when it's kind of split zone coverage. So to me, they preferred the enforcer type, right? They could have went with more of a center fielder, one high guy, but this is the player that they invested in. I also think that they really valued the man coverage ability for Cole Bishop. That was one of my favorite things about him on tape. Not that he's going to be able to line up against anybody, but running backs and tight ends, he does a really good job of matching steps and staying in phase in man coverage. And I think that ability is so important, especially when you think about some of the red zone reps where it's a condensed area of the field and you want to have your safety play right over top of a tight end. I think Cole Bishop can give you this. And if you recall, a lot of times last year, it was Taron Johnson that had to claim those responsibilities. Remember the Giants game and the end of it, and they're trying to win the game, and they're throwing the ball to Darren Waller, and Taron Johnson's the guy that has to defend him man to man in those situations. I think Cole Bishop gives the Bills another option, and maybe a more favorable option in some regards. So I think they really valued the man coverage ability. Obviously, the Bills started to blitz a little bit more last year. That put their safeties in more man coverage looks, and I thought you saw Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, have some challenges with that. And I think they restore some of that man coverage ability in Cole Bishop. I'm also fascinated to see if their dime package continues. Of course, last year it was out of necessity, where after the Milano injury, you had Tyrel Dodson leave the field, Jordan Poyer go down to linebacker, and then Taylor Rapp came on the field to play alongside Micah Hyde at safety. I wonder if this trio of safeties opens that opportunity to continue that, at least situationally, because I think you have three really nice skill sets in Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp, and Cole Bishop to do that. And so that's curious. That's something I'm curious about is, all right, does the three safety stuff continue this year? And I don't think you're going to want to take Milano or Bernard off the field, but you can get creative with what that looks like. And then the last thing I'll say here is that this is not a good sign for Damar Hamlin. Right now, I kind of look at Cam Lewis as the safety 4, and that puts Damar Hamlin at safety 5. The Bills typically roster 4 safeties. Maybe they could 5, but they can't go heavy everywhere. I don't think they're going to want to go heavy at safety when your top 4 is Edwards, Rapp, Bishop, and Lewis. I think that's something you're very satisfied with. So not a good sign for Damar Hamlin and his path to the 53-man roster. The other pick that the Bills made in the secondary was a cornerback, 6th round, 219 overall, Daquan Hardy out of Penn State. And this is one of those picks that I find myself really enjoying. We always talk about the top picks, Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, right? There's a lot to say there, but I thought between Cedric Van Pran, Edefuan Ulofoshio, who we'll get to in just a moment, and Daquan Hardy, the Bills made some day 3 picks that I really, really like, and Hardy being one of them. And I think he's going to provide this team with depth in the slot in addition to value in the return game. And we've all been a little bit concerned about depth in the slot, right? If it was Taron Johnson to be injured, Saron Neal, Cam Lewis having to play that role, I really like Daquan Hardy as a true slot corner. I think he's very competitive as a tackler and willing to be physical despite being a little smaller. And then he does have coverage instincts, and he does take away the football. I'm a little surprised he was around this late in the draft. And then it's the return ability that he's shown as well this past year, taking over those punt return duties for Penn State. Had 2 return touchdowns, averaged, I can't remember, over 14 yards per punt return. No muffs. He took care of the ball. And that's a big deal because the Bills needed an answer as a punt returner, but also with the kick return. And one thing that Bill Belichick said on one of his interviews, I think with Pat McAfee, is you better have 2 good kick returners because teams can kick away from one guy. They can't kick away from both. And so you look at the depth of returners that the Bills have in Curtis Samuel as a kick returner. Curtis Samuel, Ty Johnson, Daquan Hardy right in that mix. You want that speed because it's going to be more difficult for the kick coverage units to stack layers and waves at the returner, right? You kind of have to, that has to happen in a different way than it has in the past, where if you can crease them and you have some speed to hit those creases, you're talking about a lot of explosive runs. And so having a guy like Daquan Hardy to go back there with a Ty Johnson or a Curtis Samuel or whatever the plan is a heck of a value to provide this team. The other thing that's very meaningful to me about this Daquan Hardy pick is that it's a great sign. And I mean a great sign for Jamarcus Ingram. The Bills are going to roster 4 outside corners. Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, Kyer Elam. Then who's the 4th guy? It's very clearly right now Jamarcus Ingram. He's got a very clear path to this roster, assuming no additional moves are made. Who's he got to beat out? Kyron Brown? I think that's very doable. In fact, the Bills should add another corner if they can. And you look at this trajectory, we've seen a lot of players that have been on the practice squad and then get themselves onto the active roster a year later. And we saw it happen with Quentin Morris, Ryan Vandemark, Alec Anderson, Kingsley Jonathan, like Bucker in the past. Cam Lewis has been on this plan. I think Jamarcus Ingram's the next in line. And so I think it's a very clear path that the Bills didn't invest anything in outside corner, not only in the draft, but also in free agency. They've not done it either. The only thing they've done is cut Trey White. So good news for Jamarcus Ingram. That guy's got a very clear path to making this roster. All right, we're going to talk front seven, and of course, the Bills picking up the fifth-year option on Greg Rousseau. That's all coming your way today, so be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home those huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. See eBay Guaranteed Fit. It's only available to U.S. customers. Folks, you shouldn't have to worry when you're looking to buy tickets for your next big event. Well, you don't have to, because Game Time is here for you. And it's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer deals on last-minute tickets, all-in prices, a view from your seat, and a best price guarantee. Simply put, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The app is awesome, easy to navigate. They have flash deals. They give you a seat view. And I also love this. When you buy a ticket from Game Time, it goes straight to your phone, so you don't have to dig through emails to find it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, let's talk about the front seven here: defensive tackle, defensive end, and linebacker. At defensive tackle, the Bills invested a third-round pick, number 95 overall, in Dewayne Carter out of Duke. And I thought this was a position group that the Bills should invest a pick in. I love the idea of having a cost-controlled player. I've said this a few times, but beyond Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, who are your outstanding pair of starters, your depth has been kind of a problem because Tim Settle hasn't been very good, and Vernon Butler hasn't been very good, and Jordan Phillips hasn't been very good. And you're continuing to pay those players reasonable money to veterans to provide you with depth, and depth that's not been very good. And so now those guys are gone, and you have a one-year deal in Austin Johnson, a one-year deal in Deshaun Williams, and now Dewayne Carter. Dewayne Carter for 4 years should give you a lot of value out of that contract, assuming he can command 30, 35, 40% of the snaps. And so I love that piece of the roster building component. It's been annoying, to be honest with you, to see the lack of value in the defensive tackle depth. Hopefully Dewayne Carter can provide that. And Carter is a penetration style player. You want him to shoot gaps. You want him to get into the backfield, rush the passer. That's what he provides. And that intrigues me because that's not what exists between Deshaun Williams and Austin Johnson as the depth players. Now, I think Deshaun Williams has a little bit more of that than he's been able to showcase based on his time in an odd front defense, really his entire career to this point with Jairo Avero in Denver and Carolina. I think he's got a lot more athleticism than he's been able to showcase. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like. But having more of that and it locked in for longer is something that really appeals to me. And with Dewayne Carter and Deshaun Williams, I think you have two players that can play that 4-eye or that head up over the tackle. If you wanted to do some odd front stuff or you wanted to go heavy with your personnel, they can certainly do that for you. So I'm pretty happy with this pick and all the layers that it provides this roster. At defensive end, the Bills invested a 5th-round pick, number 168, in Javon Solomon out of Troy. And this says a lot to me. First of all, they were willing to take a swing at a specialist. Typically the Bills have went more towards like complete players or guys that give you value against the run and pass. Javon Solomon, his contributions to this team is going to be as a designated pass rusher, as a pass rush specialist. And you haven't seen the Bills roster that type of player. So that's interesting to me. And they also continue to break the mold. There's been this long thought understanding that the defensive ends that Sean McDermott wants are these 270, 280 pound guys with really long arms and are compression style rushers, right? Coney Ely, Charles Johnson, Mario Addison, Greg Rousseau, to an extent, Boogie Basham, right? These are the investments that we've really seen them make through the years. And this certainly breaks the mold. But it's also a little bit more in line with some of the rush talent that Sean McDermott had in Philadelphia with a guy like Trent Cole. So it's cool to see that piece brought back into it. And it's not like this is the way it has to be, right? There has to be this prototype. No, we're willing to take on different skill sets and see if we can make them work within the scheme or find a role for them within the scheme. And that's what you get in Javon Solomon, who's, sub 250, doesn't bring much intrigue as a run defender or like an edge setter, but he's got a lot of pass rush upside with his quickness, with his length, with his flexibility, with his pass rush arsenal. I actually went back and watched a couple of his games yesterday to get even more acquainted with his skill set. And there's a lot of different ways that he attacks the pocket. And I think he's got to, figure out like what his actual go-to move is. And, his snaps might be limited, so he's not going to have an entire game to really set up his plan. So he's got to flesh that out a little bit. But this is an intriguing addition that says a lot to me, honestly, about the direction of the defensive end spot, but also the willingness that this regime has to try out some new skill sets. Then at linebacker, the Bills invested pick 160, so 5th round, 160 overall, in Washington linebacker Edefuan Ulofoshio. And this very clearly tells me that matchup linebackers are here to stay. No more of this traditional downhill, 250 pounds, thumper, right? Like, not to say that that's exactly what Tremaine Edmunds is, but he's not a matchup linebacker because he's got that gangly frame and he has a ton of range and, really good in terms of coverage drops. But the Bills told us, very openly, whether it was McDermott, Beane, Bobby Babich last year in their press availability, saying, ideally we'd have matchup linebackers, guys that can play in space, guys that can run and cover. And that's an important layer to me because, part of my reaction to the Terrel Bernard pick, right? And it's well documented that I didn't love the Terrel Bernard pick. And that's because at the time I was like, well, Matt Milano's under contract. Tremaine Edmunds isn't. And Terrel Bernard is much more of a Matt Milano replacement than he is a Tremaine Edmunds. So I had to update my line of thinking to understand the vision because I thought that they would want, their bigger bodied true Mike and then their weak side linebacker like Milano. They don't. They want 2 Milanos. And I think every investment that they've made at the position has signaled that. This one, signing Nicholas Morrow, moving on from Tyrel Dodson, moving on from Tremaine Edmunds. All of these moves, Dorian Williams as well, all of these moves are telling us clearly that they want athleticism, guys that can run, cover, and play in space at linebacker over just girthy guys, right? And they also needed numbers here. I can't escape this enough. Like, the Bills had 5 linebackers under contract. Like, you're building a 90-man roster, and the Bills had 5 linebackers under contract. They've rostered as many as 6. So I think there's a clear path to the roster. And right now, your 5th and 6th linebackers are Balen Spector and Edefuan Ulofoshio. So I think this was a necessary move. I think he'll help on special teams. I think there is a path to the roster, like I said, and the Bills will need to continue to add more here to fill out the roster. But if there's one central theme, so I've gotten away from all the position groups, one central theme with the defensive players that were added is that in this draft with these 5 picks, the Bills added a ton of athleticism and speed to the defense. There's no question. All 5 of these dudes, big-time athletes, guys that can run. So maybe you look at the offensive side of the ball and you think, man, maybe there's room for some more speed there. Defensively, they are adding it. This defense, year over year, has gotten much more explosive, much quicker, much faster. There's no doubt about it. Moving on from Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and adding athletes like a Cole Bishop that's going to have a role. Saying goodbye to like Tyler Matakevich and Tyrell Dotson and bringing in Edefuan Ulofoshio and Nicholas Moreau. That's a big-time athletic upgrade. Moving on from Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle and bringing in a Dewayne Carter into the Sean Williams. It's a lot more athleticism there. So I just think that's a very clear theme across this defense is collectively it is much more athletic, much quicker, much more explosive than what we saw last year. And I think you can go back and watch that defense last year and feel like maybe it was slow and that there was some issues with that. Well, they've elevated that collective team speed on defense in a big way. All right, we're talking Greg Rousseau and the 5th-year option on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already been talking about that. You've been talking about it for weeks. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. You can get unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends with when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's always something new and fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it for free on the App Store or Google Play. Game on. All right, folks, let's talk about Greg Rousseau. The Bills picked up his 5th-year option on his contract. So that means that he's under contract through 2025, and he'll carry a cap hit next year of $13.4 million. That's a hard number, fully guaranteed $13.4 million. So let's start there. Is that a reasonable amount of money to pay Greg Rousseau? I think it absolutely is. Without question. A fair amount of money to pay Greg Rousseau next year. And in fact, it might be a steal. If he has a season I think he can have this year, that's going to be a heck of a dollar amount for the Bills. So at $13.4 million, that would make him the 29th highest paid edge defender in the NFL in terms of average annual value. And I wanted to look at it through the lens of average annual value because if you go just by cap hit, teams schedule their cap hits differently. It doesn't really truly tell you the cost of the player because for 1 year it could be low or 1 year it could be really high. In terms of average annual value, 13.4 is 29th in the NFL among edge defenders. Some players that are around him, Carl Granderson, $13 million. He's with the Saints. Chase Young, $13 million, also with the Saints. Preston Smith, $13 million. Zach Allen with Denver is at 15.25. I would rather have Greg Rousseau than any of the players I just mentioned. Very clearly. So I think it's appropriate dollars. It's very reasonable. I have no questions about that piece of the conversation. And looking back at Greg Rousseau's career to this point, especially at 2023, he was off to such a good start last year. Had 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and 5 tackles for loss in the first 4 games of the season. Unfortunately, in week 4, he suffered a foot injury that forced him to miss week 5, and then he just played through it the rest of the season. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation about it, but I can tell you that he had a pretty pretty significant foot injury that he just played through. And so then, of course, after having 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and 5 tackles for loss in 4 games over his last 12, while playing with a foot injury, 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, no forced fumbles. So it was definitely a big deal. And here's the thing about Greg Rousseau is he's still so young. He's entering his age 24 season. He turned 24 in April. And he's already been an NFL starter for 3 years. This is a big season for him. And he could be staring at a massive contract extension if he does take another step. And I'm looking for him to do that. I'm looking for more big impact and clutch moments, more, big time sacks and pressures. And I think he has everything necessary to do it. Remember, he's still new to playing the position. Played wide receiver and safety in high school. Really only like 1 year of production in college at the position. He's young and raw. And he's already developed into one of the best run-stuffing defensive ends in the NFL, like very clearly one of the best in that capacity. And he does get a good amount of pressure. The question is, can he take that next step and become more of a sack artist? And the money's going to be there if he does, for sure. And I know that we've seen this go 2 different ways with recent defensive players, Tremaine Edmunds and Ed Oliver. The Bills picked up the 5th-year option on both. For Tremaine Edmunds, he winds up playing on the 5th-year option, having a big season, and then going and becoming like a player that the Bills couldn't afford to keep. Then you saw Ed Oliver, they picked up the 5th-year option, and winds up really working out for the Bills, and they signed him to what is becoming one of the best value contracts for defensive tackles in the NFL based on all these other guys that keep getting signed money. I mean, even Christian Barmore just got more than Ed Oliver in his contract extension with the New England Patriots. But I think there's 2 very big differences between Edmunds and Oliver, and we'll find out about Rousseau and where he fits into this. With Tremaine Edmunds, he played that last season on the 5th-year option. Ed Oliver never played a down on the 5th-year option. The Bills extended him prior to that. So after year 4, going into year 5, the Bills extended Ed Oliver, and that's looking like an absolute home run of a contract extension for the Bills. For Greg Rousseau, they're going to have to kind of make a similar, they're going to have to look at it similarly and figure out the best path. Because let's say that Greg Rousseau has a pretty good season this year, and they let him play on his 5th-year option, and he blows up. Well, now all of a sudden, this is going to be bananas money. Or you let him play this year, see how he does. And like, hopefully after 4 seasons of starting for you, you know exactly what the player is going to be, just like Ed Oliver. And you can make that choice and say, you know what, let's do this right now. Because if he takes the step that we think he can, just like Ed Oliver does, this is going to become very expensive. So it's all about how Brandon Beane chooses to manage it from here. If I were Brandon Beane, I would let this season play out, and then I would make a choice. If he's going to be our guy, we're going to get that contract done next year, and he's never going to play it down on the 5th-year option, just like Ed Oliver never did. So we'll see what happens, but I think that's probably the best way for the Bills to attack it. All right, folks, this has been a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed. Got a lot more content coming this week for you, maybe a double dip tomorrow. And then, of course, on Friday, it's going to be me and Bruce Nolan going toe-to-toe with Brandon Beane in our annual What Would Joe and Bruce Do in the Draft. We'll tell you which picks we would have made. Maybe we would keep some of them that Brandon Beane did. Maybe we'll move on from some of them. You'll have to come back on Friday to find out. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.